What an extraordinary day of news it has been. At 6:33, let me bring in the Daily Mail star columnist Sarah Vine. Sarah, I don't actually know where to start today because so much is going on. But look, let's kick off. I've seen you've tweeted about it with this extraordinary statement from the BBC after what was an incredible rant from Emily Maitlis. And to be honest, I've always really liked Emily Maitlis. She's a very nice woman. But I'm very surprised she would do this to herself as well, given that she's meant to be an impartial host of, for example, election broadcasts on the corporation.
I know. I think Emily is an incredibly talented journalist, and I think she's one of the best. I think perhaps it just serves to illustrate the level of sort of hysteria that this story seems to have generated. I think a lot of people sort of losing slightly their normal sense of measure, if you know what I mean. I think that we seem to quite a lot of really sort of kind of veteran and well-respected journalists have been very one side or another on this. It's really divided people, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean that is an understatement. That is an understatement.
They've lost their sort of sense of perspective a tiny bit, I think. I mean, I don't think that Emily should have any repercussions from this. I'm generally not a person who calls for people to be fired when they make a mistake or get things slightly wrong, because obviously I'm always making mistakes and getting everything wrong. But I think it is interesting, and I think the BBC, it's fair play to Auntie. I think they've done the right thing, because I do think it was a bit biased and a little bit strong, what she said.
Well, I think it's an important reminder, at least to the people working on those shows, that they're not always going to have protection from their higher-ups, because I think there will be a lot of consternation at the BBC about this statement, because, of course, it does open up the fact that their news service has potentially been biased at what is quite a critical time for our country.
I mean, I think the BBC, I think I wrote at the beginning of this that, you know, this would be a real test for the BBC, actually, because it's in times like these that you really do need a very cool head in a place like the BBC. They absolutely come into their own at times of national crisis, because it's very important for them to be able to see the long view and to take a few steps back and to not sort of, succumb to kind of hysteria or panic. And I think that, I think it's too early to tell, but I don't think they've necessarily covered themselves in glory.
No, I think there have been positives. And, for example, last night Clive Myrie did an incredible report for the News at 10 from my local hospital, the Royal London. And
Clive Myrie has been really impressive throughout this whole thing, actually.
But that's what we want, because I actually, even though I have a sense, based on the people who he interacts with on Twitter, I have a sense he's probably of a liberal, has a bit of a liberal leaning, let's say. You would never know it in his broadcasts. That is the crucial thing. And I think Emily Maitlis perhaps has now crossed over into being an opinion host, which is all well and good if you were in the commercial sector, but it's just simply not a place for a BBC News reader to be. Yes,
I mean, I'm an opinion writer, obviously, and so are you. And it's a very different kettle of fish. I mean, obviously, one doesn't deliberately try to get things wrong, but you are required to put forward an opinion. That's what you're doing. And I do think that when people tune into Newsnight, they don't see it as a commentary programme. They see it as a sort of in-depth news.
Well, it's called Newsnight, isn't it? And for all of his, all of his faults, Jeremy Paxman, the arch inquisitor, you never really knew where he stood politically. He was as tough on everyone, wasn't he? But look, Sarah, 41 Tory MPs now calling on Dominic Cummings to resign. Are these MPs being disloyal to Boris Johnson and the Tory party at a time of great national crisis?
No, I think they're doing their jobs. If they feel very strongly, I mean, I think it's a free country. You should be able to voice your opinion, and particularly in Parliament, it's the most important place for doing that. If they have an issue with what Dominic Cummings did, they should be allowed to talk about it and to express their concerns. But equally, the Prime Minister, reserves the right to do what he thinks is best. So, it doesn't mean to say that that they're wrong or that they are being disloyal. It's just clearly not currently what the team at Number 10 are thinking.
Well, no, and Boris Johnson made it very clear today, didn't he, again, at that liaison committee, that he wants not just his party to move on, he wants the country to move on. But do you think...
I think that's not for him. I mean, he would like that to happen, and of course, lots of people would, but I think the country will move on when the country's good and ready, because that's what the country generally does. And I think the thing is, as this story progresses and probably mutates, as all stories sort of have a life cycle, I think it may be that, people, change their minds, take a different view, more information will come out. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. It's not quite over yet, I don't think. So I think we still have to wait and see how it pans out.
Well, especially with the police investigation ongoing, I guess. But, I mean, on a personal level, do you think he did anything wrong?
I think he did what he thought was the right thing to do for his child at the time. I think there are lots of extenuating factors. I think he was ill or becoming ill. I know that, when you have small children, you tend to think pretty sort of, linearly in that sense. All you can think about is them. And I think if he, genuinely worried that, I mean, I've done some mad dashes with my children before and for no good reason. Well, what sort of with hindsight seemed a bit over the top. Do you know what I mean? I think, he's, don't forget that he and the entire government have been working at full pelt. I mean, I think I would defy anyone to sort of to have their workloads and not be occasionally perhaps a little bit tired or emotional. Do you know what I mean?
Indeed.
So I think there's a case to be said for, they are human beings. If they made a mistake, then that is obviously regrettable. But I think the response has been really disproportionate to what he did. He didn't do anything. On the grand scale of things, he didn't do anything awful. He may or may not have made a mistake of judgment, and of course, people make their own minds about that. But it was not malicious, is what I'm trying to say.
No,
it was
indeed.
not deliberately. He didn't deliberately set out to do something awful. I mean, some people seem to think that he deliberately went off and tried to infect people. That's not true. That's that's blatantly nonsense. So I think the question is the proportionality of the response, and I think that he has. I mean, I've been at the eye of this kind of storm, and I have to say it is quite unlike anything that I've ever experienced, and it is very, very, very frightening. And I think the point that he made during his press conference about the fact that he had a lot of hostility outside his house, and that was one of the reasons why he wanted to get out of that part of town. I completely understand that, because I've had that, and it is really frightening when you've got children. I mean, my children are a bit older and a bit tougher now, so it doesn't seem to bother them so much, and they're used to it to an extent. They're just used to people shouting at them.
But I mean, and did you write in your brilliant column this morning in the Daily Mail about quite how horrific what is going on in his street really is? And I mean, that was something that I said yesterday in my monologue on the show. I just feel like this isn't a country I want to be in, where we have a senior politician like Emily Thornberry actually encouraging her constituents to shout abuse at someone who they politically disagree with. It's been very disturbing for me to watch.
I think it's helpful perhaps for your listeners to think what it would be like if it was a Labour politician in that situation. I think that we would be having a very different conversation about, the rise of the far right and all this kind of stuff. I mean, yesterday on Twitter, there was a man who threatened to pay someone to come and beat my husband up in front of his two children. Which he did repeatedly, and it sort of was, and
you don't know for sure, do you, Sarah, if these people are just madmen? You obviously assume they are, and you assume they're not going to do anything, but you don't know for sure. No,
you don't know. And the thing is, it's about having a safe space, and I think even if you're a politician that people disagree with, and you do deserve a safe space. You have to have somewhere you can go where you feel that people can't get to you. And the truth is that Dominic Cummings has been a very divisive figure for a very long time among certain sectors of the media who don't like the fact that he was, instrumental to the Vote Leave campaign. So that, there's a sort of residual Brexit sort of score that I think a lot of people want to set.
Well, look at the tweet from the civil service.
And exactly, the tweet from the civil service. And he's also very much involved in civil service reform at number 10. So that also makes him unpopular. So he's unpopular with two groups of very determined people who are very determined not to allow their worldview to be changed. And so I think he's partly a victim of that. But I think what's happened is it's become amplified, and whereas in the past these sort of stories have been fairly restricted to sort of the Westminster bubble, I think what's happened is it's sort of gone beyond that. And I do think it has sort of gone to sort of to the wider nation. And I think that's also partly to do with the fact that people have had a rotten time in the last 2 to 3 months. They've been stuck at home. Their jobs are in danger. Everyone's under a lot of stress, you see. And I think when someone presents you with a sort of scapegoat, somebody who on whom you can focus all your fury and anger about all the things that have happened to you that you consider to be unfair or wrong or mistakes by government, etc. But that is not Dominic Cummings' role. He can't be that person. That's not right to ask any one person to be that focused, and that's why I do feel very deeply for him, because I have been in a similar situation, and it is really, really, really tough. Sorry, that's my daughter coming home from her nightly skateboarding session. I must just open the door. I apologise.
Now, you obviously, Sarah, you know him as a man rather than a political advisor. We obviously don't. What is he like as a person, and is he going to be able to cope? Do you think he's going to be able to hang in there?
I haven't seen Dominic for a very long time, but I've known him sort of on and off for quite a long time, for years actually. He's a tough cookie, but he's very clever and very thoughtful. He is a tough cookie, but I don't think he will be unaffected. I don't think he's by no means. He's not this sort of Mekong figure that people think he is. He's really not. He's very he's not an insensitive man at all. He's a very very sort of emotionally intelligent person. So I think he will feel it, and hope that people can see that that standing outside his house hurling insults at his wife and child is not a really good look. No. Do you know what I mean?
Indeed.
It really doesn't justify. Nothing really justifies that. I mean, as I said, I've had it. I've had people come up to me in the street and told me that I shouldn't have children because I'm such a disgusting person, and that and people do say that. People will say the most incredible things, because what happens is they see you through the prism of something like this, and they get very angry, and then they cease to see you as a human being, and they just see you as a sort of monster, and then they feel they can say anything to you.
Well, on a lighter note to end, the whole country yesterday, it seemed, was talking about your husband's driving ability, and he brought you into the story. So is it true that he has tested out his eyesight on the road with you?
No, I don't think. I think he was. The thing about Michael is he's such a terrible driver. It took 7 attempts for him to pass his test, and even then, I'm not really sure he should have had the tick exactly. I banned him from driving the car, and I certainly wouldn't let him drive the car with the children in him. I don't recall ever going out with him. I think he was slightly wrong-footed by the question, because I think the whole subject of driving sort of triggers a kind of mild panic in his brain, and I think that might be what happened. But no, we've never been. And his eyesight's much better than mine, actually. But we both have the correct prescription for the eyesight problems that we have. So there is no danger of us driving around Mr. Magoo style.
What
not being able to see things.
mad times we're in.